Please welcome the ESA Executive Committee, Jennifer Henke, VCE ESA President. Lena Bernola, ESA Vice President. Melissa Siebert, ESA Vice President-elect. Marianne Allain, ESA Past President. Faith Oy, ESA Treasurer.
Good evening. Thank you all so much for coming to Phoenix. This is a beautiful venue for us to be at this evening. And here in, nope, I am moving Shawn's slides. I'm so sorry. There's a reason things aren't advancing for me. Let me try that again. We are here in Phoenix this evening, and we are on the ancestral lands of the O'odham and the Pi'apash peoples who continue to be part of, unfortunately, I cannot read those slides at all, but we are very fortunate to be on these lands, and we recognize that the city of Phoenix is wholly encompassed on these lands, and they continue to do the work, to work with these indigenous tribes as well as others in the state of Arizona. It is, unfortunately, sometimes the job of the president to bring you unfortunate news. And I have the difficult job of delivering some very sad news to us today about a longtime member of ESA. Dr. Donald Thomas, research entomologist at the USDA ARS Cattle Fever Tick Research Unit in Kerrville, Texas, unfortunately suffered a heart attack and passed away this morning here in Phoenix. Donald was a 50-year member of ESA and served as a subject editor for the Annals of the ESA, as well as a member of the journal's editorial board. On behalf of the ESA leadership and members, we are terribly saddened by this untimely passing, and we send our deepest sympathies to Donald's family and his colleagues at the USDA. I hope that you will join me for a moment of silence in Donald's memory, as well as for these additional members of ESA that we have lost this past year. Thank you so much. What I like to remind us of, if we have somebody like Don Thomas, who's been with us for 50 years, is that Don had found his professional home with us in ESA. And this is a place that I find my own professional home. And I hope that as you come and join me here at Entomology 2024, that this is your professional home. When we choose to come together in person like this, we have the opportunity to do a number of things, like celebrating our achievements, like being an active participant in our meeting, and planning to continue our connections with each other as we get ready to leave. When I was able to transition into this role last November, I highlighted for us that unfortunately, we had been going through quite a bit of changes in the world, and that the metaphor that I was using for us was not homeostasis, where we know we are often moved away from equilibrium, and we want to get back to where we were before. But that the right biological term for us was allostasis. That there's a change from the equilibrium, and that we end up adapting to a new equilibrium, something that's different, sometimes better, often stable. And that is what I bring you today, is where we are. We continue to go through allostasis. And perhaps Don's passing is a reminder of that. If I think about our achievements that we've had this year, then I had started thinking through our strategic plan. And we have a number of things that we have worked on this year as a governing board and as members. I could talk about all of these, and then I would keep you from a very beautiful event that's downstairs. And I would keep Shawn Otto off the stage, which is not my goal tonight. So I will highlight a few of these for you as we continue. The first of these projects that we've been working on is its governance upgrade. And so you did get an email from me a couple of weeks ago highlighting that we have been thinking carefully as ESA board members about who we are, who our leaders are, and how we pick them. Most of us probably did not make the presentations that we're sharing at this meeting on the computer that's on the screen right now. If you did, could you raise your hand? Because I'd love to understand your formatting, and maybe you still know Fortran, and that would be really helpful for some software I have in my own office. No, instead, most of us made our presentations on computers that look like this, something that is much more up to date and has changed. And if we think about our governance structure, it can be time for us to think about that as well. What has served us to this point may not be what we need in this changing climate. And our governing board has decided that we have gotten to a point where it is time to ask the ESA members to help us think about those changes and what those are. There are 3 main goals that are coming out of the project that's been proposed to you so far, which is to simplify the governing board structure, to elevate leaders with critical skills, and to enable ESA to better respond to challenges. And I could spend the whole time talking about just this as well, but instead I will highlight for you that we are going to talk about this on Wednesday. I hope that you will have read the email or come up and talk to me between now and then. I look forward to talking to you on Wednesday at 8:30 in the morning with Lena, just after the Founders Memorial Award breakfast on our strategic outlook and member forum, where we can talk through all the changes that we're considering and provide you with some time to go ahead and give us member feedback, which is what we're really looking forward to strengthen the discussion. One of the other projects that's really important to ESA is our publishing work that we do. You all know, surely, that we have a portfolio of journals that is meant to serve the varied interests of entomology members. And journal submissions this year were up 11%, which is a fantastic number for us to share. Our partners over in the Publications Council also have adopted an AI policy. And if you're interested more on artificial intelligence, there's a symposium on Wednesday morning to attend. What I also want to highlight for you is that publishing in an ESA journal is what helps keep our discipline strong. Publishing in a journal like ours helps to make sure that the facts are out there and are available to people. And publishing in an ESA journal brings that money back into our association. It is what helps keep our membership fees lower. It's what allows for us to do the good work that we want to do. If you're interested in more about publishing, and if you happen to be any of the students in particular, there is a workshop that is being led by 2 editors on Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. I know it's a little early, but on Tuesday morning, 2 editors will help you understand how to get your manuscripts published by an ESA journal. So you'll get direct education from Dave Taylor from Journal of Medical Entomology and Rebecca Schmidt-Jeffress from American Entomologist. Part of publishing is also reviewing. Somebody spends time looking at our manuscripts and considering it and giving us critical feedback and improving our work that we're putting out. And if you're not sure how to do a good review, if you'd like some tips on how to do that, I encourage you to attend the workshop that the editors from the Journal of Economic Entomology are leading on Wednesday, where they are looking forward to helping you be the best reviewer that you can be as well. An additional period of work that we've been investing in quite a bit has been science policy. And I am particularly excited about our new class of science policy fellows who are joining us and are about to embark on an amazing 2 years of their work, trying to ensure that people understand the insect science that we all do, and ensure that our legislators and our congressional offices understand the work that we're doing. They'll be joining the 2023 class, who will be in their 2nd year. This is a fantastic program that we have been really proud to have for over a decade here at ESA. and they do a fantastic amount of work. It's also my pleasure to thank our ESA staff for ensuring that we have a congressional champion of entomology, somebody in Congress who's doing amazing work on our behalf and really understands entomology in all sorts of the fun ways. Last year's champion was Senator Dick Durbin from Illinois, and this year's champion is Senator Angus King from Maine. And so if you have a legislator that you've been working with, I am sure that they would be happy, the Science Policy Fellows would be happy to hear who that is as we look forward to figuring out who will be next year's champion. One of the other responsibilities of being ESA president was to attend the International Congress of Entomology in Kyoto, and I was so pleased to see so many of you there. I got to meet with so many new members like Mike, who's meeting there with Chris. I got to meet with very seasoned members like Lisa, who's one of our editors of a journal. And one of the really exciting things that I got to do was to talk with leaders from other professional organizations like ours, but from the Hellenic Entomological Society or the Royal Entomological Society. What's interesting about that kind of work is that sometimes, perhaps even in your own fields, you can feel a little isolated. You can feel like you're the only one working on a particular problem. And that can be true even in a large organization like ESA, that there are particular issues that we're trying to work and solve, and to be able to find that there are others who are also working on the same problems can be really exciting. What I hope we will continue to do is to find spaces to have conversations with our colleagues from all sorts of places and continue to move that forward. Okay, so I've told you a little bit about the things that we achieved this year as a governing board. Hopefully as your ESA president, you feel like I've done something for you a little bit. I do want to turn now to you. One of the things that I encouraged us to do last year was to set goals for ourselves. And I think when you come to a meeting like this, you should set some goals for yourself as well. So I have 3 goals for you. The first is to be safe. The second is for you to be yourself and to respect your colleagues' choices to be themselves as well. And the last is to be present, which is really hard to do sometimes. To set down the cell phone, to stay off the emails, and to listen to the amazing presentations in front of you and to connect with your colleagues. But I do have some different ways for you to continue to connect with your colleagues while you're here. Some new things that we're trying this year from left to right. The first is a standard favorite from the Pacific Branch, which is the What's New in Industry. As you go down to the exhibit hall over the next few days, you're going to see presenters from industry partners who are going to be sharing the latest and greatest of their programs. You're going to be able to see the new techniques, new products, and new services that they're having. This is an exciting time. I've always enjoyed it in the Pacific Branch, and I'm so excited that we get to share it with you all here. I hope that you'll spend time getting these presentations from those stages in a different way than you might have a different year. The second of these is the Parasitoid Games. And when the students pitched this, I was instantly disappointed that we are not all able to participate in this because they have decided that it is a student-only game, which sounds awful, right? Like, I feel like maybe they can make some room for the president. They told me not this year. They're looking forward to it next year. If you're interested in this, or you know folks that are interested in this, you should go by the table tonight. Make sure you get registered, and you will get your eggs so that you cannot be an aphid and try to parasitize the most of your colleagues. The person who does gets a prize on Tuesday evening. The last of the things that I'm really excited that we're trying out this year as far as our exhibitor hall space is the Hive. You hopefully saw this called out in your program. These are conversation starters, and I don't know about you, but sometimes I get a little connected in with, where I went to school or where I work, and I forget to find friends and colleagues in my other interests. And so these are places for you to stop by and have some conversations with people who are interested in things that you are, but maybe isn't your school. So the topics that we have this year includes birding, failed experiments, which is super exciting, photography, and one more that ento fashion, which is always a hit. I really appreciate the members who have said that they will be part of that and seeding those conversations, and I can't wait to see what folks do. ESA has traditionally also been a very thoughtful and generous organization. If you're comfortable sharing, I'd love to see the hands of the folks who decided that they would offset their carbon footprint when they were traveling to this meeting. If you'd feel comfortable raising your hand, I'd love to see it. That is some of you. Thank you so much for doing that. Some of us also tend to think about where are we traveling and where can we make a difference with our dollars as we come in. This year, the program committee picked a number of organizations for us as part of the social offset program. This is designed so that if you're making a donation to the city of Phoenix, you can pick from one or more than one charity where your interests and your heart most align. So you can see that we have 7 different charities this year. If you're interested in food hunger and solving that problem, or if you're interested in reproductive rights or indigenous voices or a number of other areas. When you go onto the app, you can choose one or more than one of these programs. And this is something that we've continued to do based on the recommendations of past presidents and of members who have been interested in this kind of work. As you came into the meeting, I hope that you also went and got a sticker for Fill It Forward. You get a little QR sticker to put on your reusable water bottle and scan it every time that you refill your water bottle. By doing that, you're unlocking a donation that is not from you directly, but it is helping other people have clean drinking water. As another example of a way that a member has made a difference, we are partnering with Need Phoenix. This is a group that is taking unused food from our events and giving it to people who will eat it. They're also taking the food scraps from our events and composting it or turning it into food for insects. All ways that we can have a zero food waste event, which is something that one of our members had suggested to us, and I really appreciate the ESA staff looking for a good partner for us in this. If you know me well, which some of you do, maybe not all of you, but you may know that I'm really interested in art in all sorts of ways. And I am super excited that this year we're bringing back the Inside Art Expo that we're going to see in a few minutes. But I also thought that maybe we needed some time to make our own art. Earlier this year, this paper came out from Deans and Porturas in PLOS One. And what they did was take 4,000 haiku, where they looked and said, I can identify that this is on an insect or an arthropod. And what you see before you on the screen is that the larger squares was where we had more representation from that particular insect, and the smaller squares, they had fewer. But it was a really amazing study for them to take a look at and try and figure out. And you can see maybe your favorite is on there. It's impressive to see the cicadas and the fireflies. There are a few mosquitoes, which is always a good one to see in there. And so I wanted to encourage you to make some of your own art while you're here with the meeting. Just as a little, something fun for your almost past president to see on her way out of the office. So if it's been a little while since you've learned about haiku, I will remind you that it is 3 lines, generally unrhymed, with a particular format of 5 syllables in the first line, 7 syllables in the second, 5 syllables in the final line. And I would love for you to put this on whatever your favorite social media platform is with the hashtags for this meeting, but also insect haiku, so I can go and take a look at them later. I did want to give you a little bit of a version to help inspire you, and it's not a mosquito one, which was really hard for me to pick against. But this is a translated haiku that was translated from Matsuo Basho by Robert Haas. And you can see that it is a caterpillar this deep in fall, still not a butterfly. I hope that you'll take some time as you're doing this, and perhaps this is a great way to meet your colleagues and ask them what their haiku would be about as they work on this. I also would invite you that perhaps you need some more inspiration, and if you're still here on Wednesday or later in the week, I'd encourage you to go by the Phoenix Art Museum. They have a beautiful Infinity Room from Yayoi Kasuma's work. You who are getting obliterated in the dancing swarm of fireflies. It is a beautiful darkened space where the lights change color as you're in the room, and it is wonderful to be able to stand for a little while. It'd be great if they were real fireflies, but then I might step on them, so maybe it's better for it to be lights instead. I did share that we do have the beautiful Art Expo and the Artisans Row. We're going to have that opening this evening after our plenary speaker speaks. I hope that you'll go by. I hope that you'll vote for your favorites. And I really appreciate the work of our volunteers and our artists who have made this all happen. As I prepare with the last reason that we come together to try to find connection with each other, I'll remind you that our time after this is also precious. We come together to meet in person, to renew ourselves, and to really enjoy this time. And we have the opportunity and the privilege to also stay connected as we leave. So, I have 3 areas that I'd encourage you to consider as part of this. The first of these is the business meetings. And I specifically have put this in here because often as I talk to folks, even folks who have been to many ESA meetings, they will sometimes think that the business meetings that happen on Monday afternoon for the sections and the pilot section, well, that's not for me. It's a meeting, and I'm not supposed to be there. Would my section and pilot section leadership who are here, would you mind standing up for me, please? I know some of you are here and you're not standing up. I can see that well. Come on. Thank you. All of you are invited to any of these meetings. If you belong to any of these sections, they would love to see you there. If you don't belong to that section, they would still love to see you there. Is that true? Thank you. I hope that you will attend one or more than one on Monday afternoon. I hope that you will find new friends and new collaborators and old friends and collaborators in these spaces. One, for particularly our students and our early career professionals, is that as you network and as you meet with each other this week, you may find or you may be thoughtful about the fact that you were wishing that your skills were a little stronger. And I would encourage you to apply for the Professional Advancement Career Training Program. This is a great way to meet people who are not in academia. I happen to be a mentor myself, where we talk routinely about emotional resilience and about problem solving and about the important, sometimes called soft skills, but the important skills for any job, including academic jobs. If you're interested in this, I hope that you'll consider going to this workshop. And often when I talk about this, I hear from folks who are mid-career and senior career going, but I need that too. I need that too. I often need that. And all I can say to you right now is coming soon. We have been talking about this as a governing board, and we are looking forward to being able to share that with you soon. We have heard that there's a need, and we're looking forward to having something developed in the near future. The last piece that I'll highlight for you is that it has been an immense privilege to be your ESA leader. And one of the reasons to consider being a leader is to remember that at any point, we are just stewards of the organization at the time that we are. Much like walking in the stream, that stream continues to change even after we leave. And the stream that it was when you first walked is different when you come back the second time through. It continues to carry on without us. But there are still amazing things that we can do with that stream. I asked if ChatGPT could help me out a little bit with this, and so I asked, could you, without wasting too many gallons of water, could you produce for me a picture of an insect leader? And it produced this one. I chose insect leader because I was like, well, I'm not sure that ChatGPT knows an entomologist, so I'll try that first. And I thought that was super cute, and I was like, it is, but it's not what I had in mind. Would you mind trying again? And it did. And I think she's a little more menacing than my cute little guy from before, right? Like she looks a little, She looks a little bad. Maybe in a good way, but like a little bad. That's what I should have been for Halloween. And I said, okay, well, that's not working out for me. Can you tell me about leading entomologists? And ChatGPT said, sure. Let me show you a few. Showed me E.O. Wilson and May Berenbaum. Showed me Corey Moreau and Tom Seeley. And showed me Dave Golson and Jessica Ware. There's a lot of things to like about this particular image, right? It's a number of different folks. A number of folks who are past presidents of this association, includes a couple of fellows, and yet also shows that we have a few things to teach ChatGPT. I'd highlight for you that of the insects orders that are studied by these 6 leading entomologists, 5 of them study Hymenoptera. None of them study mosquitoes, which I have a problem with. But also, we are only representing the countries of the United States and Canada and Great Britain. And we know there are so many more entomologists out there who are leading in their fields and who belong on this. So, whether it's the awards or leadership positions or committee positions or anything else, I invite you to be one of our next leaders. You probably already are one, and I hope that you will continue to be one. I can't wait to have your face be what is produced for me by ChatGPT the next time. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce the first of a series of videos that we're going to have. There'll be some back and forth for a little bit, but next up is a video from one of our industry partners. Thank you.
The Rusty Patched Bumblebee was listed as endangered in 2017, and really what it makes it unique is it was the first bee to be listed as endangered in the lower 48 states. At the time of listing, it was determined that we lost over 90% of Rusty Patched Bumblebee populations from its historic range.
Bumblebees in general are really important pollinators. In fact, their pollination is different than honeybees, and they pollinate not only crops but also the wildflowers.
Pollinators are crucial for agricultural systems, food production, but also for the natural systems that we rely on as well. You know, the natural systems that produce clean water, clean air, and habitat for other wildlife.
The Rusty Patched Bumblebee habitat restoration, it's important because if we create more habitat, create a better place for them to live, we can actually help the species. Here we are, where there are some of these pollinator habitats established. This is just another example where there's milkweed all around. I'm seeing bee balm. It just brings a lot of things in, whereas if you just had, let's say, mowed grass, you wouldn't see the pollinators.
We do the outreach with a landowner, or a landowner comes to us and says, hey, I'm interested in doing a prairie planting. We'll go check out the site, make sure this is a good site for the project. It's in kind of this scrubby, unproductive zone. These areas that are low in production, edge of fields usually, you're kind of losing money on them a lot of the time, so let's implement these prairie strips. Now, what's the landowner's goal? So is their goal water quality? Is their goal habitat? So we can kind of design these plots a little bit different. Then once we have that interest, I can bring in U.S. Fish and Wildlife and provide the technical assistance. What do we want to plant here? What's going to grow? What's going to be the most successful? So that's kind of how this partnership works.
We have reached countless landowners talking about the initiative, talking about the efforts of Soybean, Syngenta, of Fish and Wildlife Service. Everybody brings something to the table, and I think that's why this partnership is so special.
There's been so much enthusiasm around the Rusty Patched Bumblebee. There's so many people, landowners, farmers, that really want to get involved in this program, and they really want to do the right thing for the environment.
Please welcome Chris Stelzig, ESA Executive Director.
Very bright. So, All right, nice to see you all. Thank you for being here in Phoenix with us. I wanted to start with this slide for a couple of reasons. First off, it's beautiful, and we don't get views like this back in Maryland, where I'm from. But also, I wanted to share it because it reminds me of something that a friend of mine, who's a consultant for associations, said early in the days of the pandemic. And yes, we still use the P word. What he said is that the pandemic hit us like we all fell into a canyon. And it's hard, and it's rocky, and it's bumpy, and on the way down, and you land, you dust yourself off, and you just start to walk back up. But you do have to decide if you want to be where you were, or do you want to be somewhere new? And I think I wanted to share this because over the past few years, I think we've really started to climb up somewhere new. And that is because your leaders of ESA, the volunteer leaders, just to be clear, have been asking the hard questions. And they've been looking for opportunities to improve the society. And I wanted to reflect on some of those with you here. Before I did that, though, I wanted to also start with a couple of the meeting reminders. Jennifer talked on it, so I won't spend too much time. But it is really important that we do help keep each other safe here. And one of the key ways to do this is, as we are all exploring the city of Phoenix together, please, as you leave the convention center, as you leave your hotel, take your name tags off, put it in your pocket, because nothing's gonna flag you like somebody that's from out of town, quite like a name tag. So please be aware of that. Check in on each other, and let's all be a part of this community together. But I also wanted to flag the code of conduct. At its simplest form, we are agreeing to treat each other with respect, even if we disagree. So we have all agreed to be to abide by this code of conduct while we're here together. So thank you for your support of that. And then also I wanted to flag these meeting icons that you might see on various presentations. This means please don't take pictures. Not surprisingly, this means it's okay to take pictures. Please don't post on social media. And this would mean, of course, please do post about this on social media. For what it's worth, you're welcome to take pictures of me. Watch the glare. But we are excited about honoring each other's preferences there. Also, oops, hit the right button? There we go. Make sure that we're also aware of the folks that are going to see around wearing these red vests. They are sponsored by the city of Phoenix. It's the Ambassadors Program. Other than Jennifer's red jacket, if you see someone out there wearing one of these, they are looking to help you find your way around the city of Phoenix. So really grateful to what's proven to be some great partners here in the city of Phoenix as we've moved forward. Now, as some of you know, I've been with ESA for a terrifically long time. It's pushing 25 years. It'll be 25 years this spring, which blows my mind. Thank you. But it's really been great. It's been a fantastic ride. This is like Christmas for me each year when I come to the annual meeting. I really do enjoy it. But what I wanted to share is sort of at that time scale, what's some of the changes that we have seen in ESA since then? And it's been a tremendous growth that we have had in a number of the different programs that we have. We used to be let's just say a vision, a lot of folks thought of us as stodgy and rinse and repeat on a lot of the programming that we would do. But again, today's leaders, and for the past 25 years that I've been involved with ESA, have really been building the professionalism, and we've grown a number of our programs in a lot of different ways. The one that's really been close to my heart is the certification program. I'm a big believer in ESA certification. And as our audience at this meeting has changed over the years, you look around, you see an awful lot more students. Everyone that is one of the students here in the room and you have not yet applied for your BCE intern, I'm going to encourage you to do it. It is a great way to differentiate yourself and stand out from the crowd, and it's way cheaper to do it and easier when you're a student because you are still used to taking tests. Speaking as someone who did my own certification association management, it gets a lot harder the further you move away from school. Also wanted to flag again a program that we changed a couple of years ago that is not yet known by everyone. It used to be if you wanted to join a different section or a different branch from what you're normally part of, we charge you $25. We moved away from that during the pandemic, and we have seen section and branch growth throughout that period. Now, the one I wanted to flag here, first off, is two things. On the section side, first, the formal and informal teaching pilot section is really moving toward what will looking increasingly to be a full sectionhood, and we're excited about that. However, only 7% are involved with that so far. The one that I'm particularly interested, though, is there's still 11% of you who have not yet affiliated with a section for whatever reason. Now, what I would ask of you is during this next week that we're here together, if you're not in a section, come find me, come talk to me. I'll be the bald guy. And I can help you pick out what is the best section for you, as can any of the other section leaders. And then branch, again, we've seen a lot of growth there as well. I wanted to flag some changes we've had at the staffing side, at the headquarters level. One of the most obvious ones is we did make a decision this past year to outsource the CFO position. So that's now with an external firm. So they've also been handling our HR from that point forward. So that's been a big change for us. We're still blessed to have Alexis Lyons with us as our senior staff accountant. In what might be the world's most difficult onboarding, Megan Lee McCardle has joined us here in Phoenix. It's her first day today. So if you see her, please welcome her aboard. She's our new Grants and Equity Coordinator. And then also in our publications department, not very long ago, Matt Hudson did get headhunted away to work for a different association. He'd been our Director of Publications, Communications, and Marketing. We broke that department apart and reached out to our good friend Josh Lancette, who was formerly our Managing Editor, and delighted to be welcoming him back on staff on December 2nd. So that was really good news. Now, looking at a couple of the programs that we offer, I want to just touch on a couple. And I was really excited last year to start talking about insect science career data. It's a fantastic program that we offer. It's the kind of programming ESA should have been doing for the past 20 years. But as they say, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. Second best time is right now. I wanted to talk about this, but then I got this email from one of our members, and let me just go ahead and read it for you. It says, a couple of weeks ago, I received an offer from a university. I'm part-time at the moment, but I didn't think the salary was accurate. I shared the information from the career data salary report, and because of that, I was able to negotiate a much better salary than what they offered. Thank you for making this resource available. I'm sharing this because this is what equity looks like. The more that we can offer programs and build ways for you to make sure that we're all at a level playing field, this is a program I fully believe in, and I would ask all of you to fill out this QR code. I've talked long enough on the screen. Everybody should be taking the picture. Please participate in this. Your data is private. It is never reported individually. It's always in the aggregate, and we'd never even report on the categories until there's enough data in those categories to be aggregated. Jennifer talked about some of our workforce development programs, but I wanted to flag a little bit more. First is the FIFA, Public Health Entomology for All program that we do with our partners from the CDC. It's a great way that we identified there was a dearth of folks going into public health entomology, worked with CDC. We've been able to build a program that is really building, I think 35 folks have been going into the public health entomology workspace through this program. Jennifer talked about the PACT program, so I won't dwell on that. Also, I talked about our certification, and so I won't spend too much time other than just one more encouragement that look into this, and please talk about this to your colleagues. And then one more, there we go, science policy. Also, we've been building a number of bridges with other organizations. When I first started with ESA, I was marketing and public affairs manager, and it was the simplified marketing. Today we've got Instagram Reels, we've got all kinds of different ways that we keep track of how we can reach you best in the ways that you prefer. We've also been doing a lot of outreach to other organizations, looking for partnerships with the National Science Teachers Association is a good example of one of the things that we're interested in. And again, I'll mention the FIT pilot section. This is one of their sample pieces of artwork. And then also a friend of mine who's on the exhibit floor, Braden Coy. He runs the Little Dudes Insect Academy. As you walk the exhibit floor over these next few days, check him out because this is what the future of entomology looks like. And I will close with the metaphor that I started with on the idea of a canyon. And this is a hike I've done, though this is not my picture. This is Havasu Falls from the south rim of the Grand Canyon. And I share it because this is the view from the bottom of the canyon. And we sometimes think of the idea of when they're in the depths of the pandemic as it's difficult, it's awful, and what can we possibly do about it? There is still beauty. There is still stuff to learn, and that's what I feel like ESA has been doing over these past couple of years. We have been climbing back out somewhere new on a different part of the canyon wall, and we're still feeling some of the reverberations of that. We're still a little dusty and bruised, but ESA is on solid footing, and we have pathways to get us back to exactly where we need to be in the growth trajectory. But there is an element that involves every one of you. Everyone in this room is an evangelist and an acolyte for the society that we all have spent an awful lot of time supporting. So I will thank you for whatever you can do to help build the society, whether it be peer reviewing, submitting to the journals, coming to meetings like this, and also making sure that we have as many full members as well as student members here. We've seen a tremendous growth in the student member, but I think ESA today is on a dynamic path moving forward. So I will close by one more thank you to our corporate partners and a thank to everyone in this room as well for your participation. So thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Peter Jensen, Entomology Innovation Leader for Bayer.
Wow, tough to follow two speakers that I admire so much. Those were both inspirational. Good evening, welcome to Phoenix. My name is Peter Jensen and I'm an entomologist. I work at Bayer Crop Science. I am very proud that Bayer is a corporate partner with the ESA, as are all of my colleagues that are attending that are here. Bayer has a great fit with this year's theme, this year's meeting theme, Empowering Tomorrow. Oh my gosh, I knew I wasn't gonna remember it. Thank you, Empowering Tomorrow through Insect Science. And it's because we invest so much in R&D as well as in the development of our people. In fact, we, by percentage revenue, invest the most in research and development in the agricultural space, something that we're all proud of and something that makes it a very exciting place to work. I've been attending this meeting, I think like Chris, since 2000. When I was a young, very shy graduate student studying solitary bees. Yeah, still am shy. My current role, leading entomology and innovation in our plant biotechnology organization, has me focused on making our insect control pipeline in plant biotechnology faster, safer, smarter, and stronger. And those are all things that match up and are focused on making and serving our mission of health for all and hunger for none. In my time with Bayer, I've had a chance to work on a lot of really exciting projects, but some that I'm most proud of and excited to mention are working on environmental safety studies for the first RNAi trait to control western rootworm, corn rootworm. Designing and building a brand new insectary in Argentina, and honestly doing field efficacy testing every year with the latest and greatest traits coming through our pipeline in North America and South America. I work with a lot of other entomologists at Bayer that have really cool jobs as well. Some are designing new studies, insect bioassays for the lab in India, in Bangalore. I just had a chance to meet some of those. It was an amazing, amazing experience. Some of them work with engineers and are developing mind-boggling automation to do insect bioassays here in the US. And some are out in the field meeting with our customers, meeting with farmers, and talking to them about how our products are performing and what it is that they need from us down in Brazil, in North America, all around the world. And we're all working together in all of those roles towards a common goal, and that's one of the things that I like the most. If you want to learn more, please come visit us. We do have a booth down in the exhibition hall. I know that in 2000, the graduate student that attended would not have had the courage to come and talk to the current me. Not a chance, but please let me empower you now to come stop by the booth and talk about tomorrow, or talk about insect science, or just come say hi and introduce yourself. We would love to talk to you. We will have scientists in the booth throughout the meeting. I often pinch myself. I'll do it right now, actually. At events like this, but also day to day in my role, I feel very proud to work with entomologists that are so passionate and have such integrity. I'm excited that I get to work with new technology so often and with new partners so often. And I'm thankful that I'm working in insect science. That's who I am, that's who we are, and we are Bayer. Thank you very much. Have a great meeting.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Peter. It is my pleasure to start us with some of the awards that we'll be giving out tonight. We'll be giving out our ESA Fellows and our ESA Honorary Members, starting with the Honorary Members. Sometimes folks don't recognize what's the difference between an Honorary Member or a Fellow. And for those of you who are considering who should be nominated, our Honorary Members are the ones who have given back to this organization, who are the leaders for either ESA Central, like we are here today, or the branches or sections or other areas. And our fellows are the leaders within our discipline, the ones who are making a difference whether they belong to ESA or not. But when you look and try to get ChatGPT to say who is an insect leader, the fellows are the faces that should show up. It is my pleasure to welcome them and to thank them for all of their work, and I'm looking forward to that.
'24 Entomological Society of America Premier Awards. ESA Honorary Members. Honorary membership acknowledges those who have served ESA for at least 20 years through significant involvement in the affairs of the Society. Gary J. Brewer, professor of insect management at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, has a long record of service to entomology, ESA, and affiliated professional societies. He was department chair at both North Dakota State University and UNL. His extensive involvement in ESA includes NCB president and 2 terms on the governing board, and he was chair of the Council of Entomology Department Administrators and the ESA representative to the Council for Science and Technology. Dr. Mustafa Debon is Distinguished Member of the U.S. Army Medical Department, an ESA board-certified medical and veterinary entomologist, educator, and researcher in insect repellents. He received his BA in biology from Skidmore College, MS in entomology from the University of New Hampshire, and a PhD in entomology from the University of Missouri-Columbia. His global military and civilian entomological work have taken him to over 35 different countries to provide efficient and sustainable management of disease vectors and human protection from mosquito and vector-borne diseases. He has published over 135 peer-reviewed articles, 24 book chapters, and 5 co-edited books on insect repellents and public health entomology. Michelle Smith retired this year after a 33-year career in Corteva Agriscience, where she held leadership and technical roles across disciplines and platforms. Michelle received her BA from Hollins University and her MS degree in entomology from Virginia Tech. Throughout her career and in nearly 40 years as an ESA member and leader, Michelle magnified her impact on entomology through an unwavering commitment to people development, diversity and inclusion, team success, and continuous learning. ESA Fellows. ESA Fellow recognizes individuals who have made outstanding contributions to entomology. Dr. Elizabeth Betsy Beers has worked for Washington State University since 1985, with responsibility for research and extension in Washington's tree fruit industry. Her program has focused on grower problems and adapting to changing needs in IPM programs, including conservation, biological control of indirect pests, and invasive species management. Dr. Henry Fatamiro is a professor of entomology and associate vice president for research at Texas A&M University. He is known for his research on insect behavior, chemical ecology, and IPM. Fatamiro has received over $20 million in grants, authored 130 plus publications, and mentored over 40 graduate students and postdocs. Chao Yang Li, PhD, is a professor and endowed presidential chair in urban entomology at the University of California, UC Riverside. He is internationally known for his research on the behavioral, ecological, and physiological adaptations of urban insect pests, aiming to understand how these adaptations help pests thrive in urban environments and their biological trade-offs. Dr. Tracy C. Lesky, Research Leader, Station Director, and Research Entomologist at USDA ARS Appalachian Fruit Research Station, Kearneysville, West Virginia, was elected Fellow in 2024. She is internationally known for her research on behavioral ecology of invasive and persistent native pests, of temperate fruit crops, and development of sustainable tools for their management.
A huge congratulations to all of our award winners, and we're looking forward to additional members being nominated next year for these awards. It is such a thrill to give those out, as you saw, and it is just thrilling to see so many richly deserving award recipients. Next up, we will have a video from another of our industry partners, and following that, Boris Castro from Corteva will be coming up to make some remarks. Thank you.
We're on a mission to feed the future by helping farmers worldwide be more resilient, more productive, more sustainable for generations to come through innovations like crops grown from smart seed technology that are climate, insect, and disease resistant, and sustainable crop protection products to help farmers keep growing. So how do we do it? We bring the brightest minds and the best partners to work together on farmers' fields, in research labs, in production facilities, and in offices around the globe to deliver solutions that will help feed and fuel the world. Corteva Agriscience. Keep growing.
Good day, my name is Marlene. I'm a member of the Field Sciences team. We focus on crop protection solutions. I love being around the plants and the insects. Sometimes it's just mind-blowing what you find in the field. I really have a passion for the insects, and sometimes I get super excited, and some of the insects I would just stop and start taking pictures, and I get so excited I distract myself. But yeah, being out in the field, collecting data, I enjoyed it.
Good evening. On behalf of all of us at Corteva, it is a great honor to be here at Entomology 2024. My name is Boris Castro. I am a technical knowledge solution scientist at Corteva, and I am also serving as the current president of the North Central branch. And this month, I am particularly happy because I am reaching 30 years of ESA membership. So I probably use one of those computers. So Corteva is extremely excited to be a gold sponsor, and supporting the annual meeting highlights Corteva's continued commitment to you, to science, and to the success of our scientific community. So remember that this meeting is for you. It is about you. So my only asking for all of you today is to take full advantage of this opportunity that the sponsorship creates. So showcase your research, expand your network, amplify your voice, and communicate your message efficiently. So please come and visit us at the Corteva booth and find out more about our technologies, about our innovation, our people, and our science. Thank you very much.
Well, again, a huge thank you to all of our industry partners and for all of you for being here. It is my pleasure now to introduce tonight's plenary speaker, Shawn Otto. Shawn is an internationally recognized author. I'm not worrying about that, that's not my problem. Shawn Otto is an internationally recognized author, speaker, and science advocate. He has worked for years to get politicians to focus on major science issues like climate change and to base policy decisions on evidence while working to get journalists to do a better job of covering these important questions. He was the organizer of the U.S. presidential science debate initiatives in 3 presidential cycles, along with the AAAS and the National Academies, and was recognized by the IEEE-USA National Distinguished Public Service Award for his work, elevating science in American public dialogue. Shawn is the author of 2 award-winning nonfiction books, Fool Me Twice and The War on Science, which explore the relationship between science and democracy. The War on Science has been called a game changer and probably the most important book you'll read this year. He lives in Minnesota in a solar and wind-powered home he designed and built with his own hands. At the conclusion of his remarks, you will see that we will be taking questions, so I hope that you will be ready to jump up, come to one of the microphones, and ask those at that time. I am sure that you are going to want to either have your book signed by Shawn or to purchase a book. He will be signing both The War on Science and The Sins of Our Fathers immediately after this session out near registration, and you can purchase a copy there. Shawn, I have gotten so many comments about people who are really looking forward to this. Please, we are looking forward to hearing your discussion tonight. Thank you.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Yeah? Okay, I just want to start by saying how honored I am to be talking to you guys tonight. Everyone that I've met are such amazing people, and I so appreciate what you do, especially. I wanted to start by doing a show of hands here. I know it's kind of hard for me to see you out there, but let's see, how many people think humans are causing climate change? Okay, almost everybody, maybe everybody. I'm not going to count right now. How about this one? Oh, there we go. Is GMO food safe to eat? Good. A little fewer, actually, which is kind of interesting because in a AAAS survey, there are actually more scientists who say that GMO food is safe to eat than that say that humans are causing climate change. Finally, well, not finally, how about this one? Does the Earth orbit the sun? I'm throwing you kind of an easy one there. We don't have to do show of hands in that one. How about this, though? Are square A and square B the same color or different colors? Who says they're different? Okay, who says they're the same? Okay, remember that position. Now, what if I told you that the evidence suggests the conclusion that square A and B are the same color? What would you say? I mean, this is something that people hear in the news, for instance, from scientists when talking about climate change. The evidence suggests that humans are causing climate change. And yet we tend to reject things that we hear that don't comport with what we think of as common sense. Here's the proof. That in fact, square A and B are actually exactly the same color. And the reason that this perceptual illusion works is because we construct our experience of reality. We tend to think and assume that we're seeing all this information through our eyes as the world really is. But in fact, only 10% of the neural connections in our visual cortex come from our eyes. The other 90% come from other parts of the brain. we construct our reality with certain predetermined assumptions. We've evolved in a world, for instance, where the sun is overhead. So the way that our brains interpret images where we perceive shadows automatically adjust color for us. And it makes it very difficult, even seeing the proof, to see that they are actually the same color. Now that common sense question is really important to keep in mind as we go through the rest of this talk. There are these hidden assumptions that cause us to misconstrue reality regularly. This is, of course, why science is so powerful, because science is a method to help us see reality more accurately. And that increases our freedom, because that knowledge that we have gives us power. So now that I've taken away the proof, it becomes even harder to actually remember what we saw and perceive them as the same color. That's how ingrained our assumptions are in the way that we perceive reality. And those things can be taken advantage of when we're talking about policy discussions, especially policy discussions that involve science, when science is telling us something that's not intuitively obvious. Wherever the people are well informed, Thomas Jefferson said, they can be trusted with their own government. And this was kind of a principle that he used in drafting the Declaration of Independence, in fact. Here he was sitting in this second floor, hot little rented set of rooms in Philadelphia, charged with writing this document to convince the Enlightenment leaders of the countries in Europe to stay out of the Revolutionary War. Because otherwise, as Benjamin Franklin said, we must all hang together or we shall surely all hang separately. Franklin and Jefferson were both scientists. Jefferson was an attorney as well. But what they drew on to make this argument to these leaders was the ideas of science. That's what was popular in the courts of Europe during the Enlightenment. So Jefferson went to what he called his Trinity of Three Greatest Men. He has their pictures still hanging in the halls of Monticello: John Locke, Francis Bacon, and Isaac Newton. And Locke defined what knowledge is and how it's separate from what he said was but faith or opinion. And Bacon, like Jefferson, was a lawyer and an attorney. He developed the modern scientific method, but he was also very concerned with constraining the power of authoritarian kings by using arguments that were based on reason and evidence. And Isaac Newton determined that there is a knowable, measurable world, and therefore these natural laws that the world follows could form a basis for laws that humans used. So these were super popular, greatest hits, if you will, in the conversations in Europe. And that's really why Jefferson went to them to convince these kings and queens, these royalty, to stay out of the war. And he distilled a lot of their thinking and embedded it into the Declaration of Independence. The philosophical foundation in a lot of ways for the Declaration and for the United States of America was the arguments of science at the time. And if you were to boil it down, it came down to if anyone can discover the truth of something for him or herself using reason and science, then all people are created equal. Now, of course, he said all men. He was a man of his time, but the principle of it is the same. All people are created equal. No king, no pope, no wealthy lord has more right to govern than any one of us, than we the people. So what happens now, 248 years later, when this country that he helped found, using the principles of science and technology that grew out of science, has become the most dominant, powerful country in many ways in the world. Well, we're presented with an interesting challenge because this ability of the people to self-govern is being sorely tested by our advancing knowledge. We have what I call a science-tech democracy gap. And I use this image of a phone to illustrate it. Some of you, like me, can probably remember when you were a kid this thing called Heathkits. I don't even know if they're around anymore. But you could make a radio, or you could make a TV. I used to take these things apart when I was a kid to try to figure out how they work. It's a lot harder to do that. You can do it, but it's a lot harder to do it with this iPhone. There's no Phillips screws in the back. There's no tubes that you plug in and out. It's all micro-printed circuitry. So that makes it much less accessible. It's become less a thing of know-how than a thing that we just accept that it works. In fact, functionally, our phones are equivalent to Harry Potter's broom. They're both made by people cloistered away wearing long robes and uttering strange incantations. But what that does is it makes science and tech less a matter of know-how and more a matter of belief. And that erodes the foundation of our ability to self-govern, because the second that something becomes a matter of belief, it can be argued with. This, in fact, was a thing that Jefferson and Franklin argued with in the first draft of the Declaration of Independence, where Jefferson had written, "We hold these truths to be sacred and undeniable, that all men are created equal." And Franklin took a look at that draft and he put some sharp backstrokes blocking that sacred and undeniable out. And they talked about this and decided if you make a religious argument, it can be argued with indefinitely by people claiming a different faith. So Franklin wrote in the words, self-evident, drawing from his friend, the philosopher David Hume and John Locke, basing the United States, the argument for it, on evidence. Evidence. So, an example of what happens when science and tech gets a little bit too advanced is what happened in 2011 with the World Health Organization. They issued a report saying that your cell phone may cause brain cancer. And I looked at that report at the time because it struck me that this is really an odd thing for them to say. And I read the report, and the statistical fluke that they saw was really below the noise level. So while it was true that you could say that your phones may cause brain cancer, there was really no supportable statistical justification for saying that. I thought it was really irresponsible of them. In fact, when you look at the electromagnetic spectrum here from NASA's website, you see that the microwave photons that our cell phones use to communicate have far, far less energy than the photons up through, you have to go up through infrared, up through visible light to the bottom of ultraviolet light before a photon has enough energy to knock a electron out of valence in a carbon atom, thereby changing the chemical bonding properties of that carbon atom, and potentially then altering our DNA and causing cancer. But I did the calculation at the time just to make sure that I could do it and that I really understood it. And I had to go back and double check, but I had to know a little bit about biology, a little bit about chemistry, a little bit about physics to confidently know that a microwave photon just doesn't have enough energy to give me brain cancer. Unfortunately, our policymakers generally don't do that and can't do that. They don't have the time. They don't have the knowledge, so who do they trust? The Board of Supervisors in San Francisco, based on this report, voted 11 to none to require every cell phone shop in San Francisco to warn you that your cell phone may cause brain cancer. It's an example of poor policy making. If you really understood the difference, it's like the difference between getting hit at 30 miles an hour by this BMW Z4 and getting hit by that P. I don't know if you can see it, it's under the W there. Coming out from a pea shooter at 30 miles an hour. Which one do you think is going to do more damage? But this presents an interesting problem that we're facing, because what if you change that cell phone into a voting machine? Equally obscure in many people's thinking.
Venezuela Dominion machine.
Our election in America is a joke, and Maricopa is a joke.
You are the cancer that is tearing this nation apart. Good day.
I don't know why I didn't say sir at the end. It would have been more fitting. Kind of a Ren-festy talk down. Matt Baker, ladies and gentlemen, right here in Maricopa County, dressing down the Board of Supervisors here over the 2022 midterm election results. The lack of trust in our election process is largely driven, as many of us know from the headlines, about claims about certain voting machines. Again, where the technology is a little bit obscure and a little bit beyond widespread comprehension. So we're seeing this start to bubble up in a lot of ways. In fact, we've seen it with all of these different science policy, science tech policy issues that are cropping up. Issues that are caused by science and tech, or where the solution lies in science and tech, or both, where our expanding knowledge is posing incredible policy challenges. In fact, we're expected to create as much new knowledge now with all those labs that are connected over the internet as what those blue lines represent, in the next 20 to 30 years as we have in the last 400 years. So think about all the policy arguments that we've had, all the cultural arguments we've had since the trial of Galileo, and since Copernicus's idea that maybe the Earth isn't at the center of the universe. Now compress that into 20 years, and you can see why we're beginning to enter a new disruptive time in human history. So the question is are the people still well enough informed to be trusted with their own government? And I love that photo. Both those signs go together so well. And even though Matt Baker and this dude here are kind of funny, they pose a really serious challenge that we all have to take seriously. An example of that challenge is what happened during COVID. The United States was well positioned through our public health research and our public health enterprise, our surveillance systems around the world, to have by far the best outcome from the COVID-19 pandemic. But instead, by many measures, we had the worst outcome of any country in the world. Now, you can argue about the various reasons why that happened, but I would suggest that many of them had to do with our policy positions and the leadership. In fact, in the 4 years of the Trump administration, there were massive budget cuts proposed 4 years in a row. There were a historic number of science leadership appointments left vacant compared to his predecessors. So the agencies sometimes had interim chiefs, sometimes they were just somewhat adrift. Scientific data and info was scrubbed from government websites if it didn't agree with the president's views, particularly on climate change, but also on health issues. Political activists were appointed to lead the science agencies. These were non-scientists in many cases. Some cases they did have science backgrounds. And scientists were often bullied and intimidated to comply or quit. So this set up an environment where by the time COVID hit, more than 1,600 scientists had left the federal government between 2017 and late 2019. But the problem isn't Trump's fault. The problem's been going on long before him. On the right, it's been going on since climate change really became an issue that policymakers began to take up after James Hansen testified before Congress. Here's an article from 2012 where a new law was passed in North Carolina banning sea level rise. And essentially what this was local governments issuing building permits or for new hotel construction or for roadbed improvements close to the ocean couldn't take the actual scientific projections of sea level rise into account. They had to use the pre-approved numbers from the state legislature, which was controlled by Republicans. It's a move that was really reminiscent of Maoist China more than it was of the United States. That's 2012, so long before Trump came along. But it's not just the right, it's also been happening, oh, sorry, I forgot about that one. DeSantis this year, of course, doing a similar thing, deleting climate change from Florida policy in the state that is most vulnerable to climate change because of political pressure. He's not a stupid man. He's doing this to respond to his constituency and to the messaging that he's surrounded with, which is what politicians do. But it's not just on the right, it's also on the left. Here's an article from 2015. City of Snowmass, Water Board decided to remove fluoride from their water. This is something that many cities, especially left-leaning cities, have done over the belief that fluoride causes intellectual impairment. Despite the fact that the CDC ranks it as one of the 10 greatest health initiatives of the last century. Again, from 2015 in this case. Now, of course, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as Trump's health czar, if he is appointed, maybe he'll lead the FDA, maybe something else, wants to do the same. So the reason that I show you these examples is because science itself is never partisan, but it's always political. And the reason I say this is because science either confirms or challenges somebody's vested interests. So you come up with a conclusion and it confirms somebody's view of the world or it confirms their economic interests and they champion it. But if you could come up with a conclusion that contradicts that, that exposes them to economic peril, for instance, like the conclusion that burning fossil fuels causes climate change, they fight back. And that makes it political. So as scientists, you need to think about that. It's not partisan, but there are political ramifications because knowledge itself is power, and power is political. So it's more appropriate than the left-right continuum that we often think of in politics between conservative and progressive, to think more in terms of a plane where politics has a top-down component or dimension as well. And that's between anti-authoritarian and authoritarian. And for those that are confused about what's been happening in our politics over the last 15 years or so, it's because we've had this shift in our tensions between left and right to between anti-authoritarian and authoritarian. It's possible to see a conservative anti-authoritarian that's on the top left, or a conservative authoritarian on the, I'm sorry, did I say top left? Yeah, top right. Or a conservative authoritarian that's on the bottom right. I'd say in the far bottom right, you'd expect to see somebody like Adolf Hitler, but you'd also expect to see an authoritarian like Mao Zedong in the bottom left. So thinking about our politics in this dimensional way allows us to be more, have a better understanding of what's happening and to be more equipped in how we deal with it and, in fact, maybe how we make arguments around it. So this war on science that I talk about really has 4 major battlefields. And the first of them, I love this one, by the way. If you look at the very bottom, you can see this is from, I don't know when it's from, like 15 years ago or something. It's an Onion magazine. But the bottom says, 5 valuable lessons in humility I ought to ignore by Donald Trump. So the ideological war on science really has to do with moral objections to origins science. So the origin of the universe, for instance, and the place of humans in it. This is a threat. In fact, almost all origin science is a threat in some way to religion, who long claimed that authority. And if science takes that over, well, then it weakens the position of religion. Or the origin and evolution of species, especially humans. That's Clarence Darrow and William Jennings Bryan arguing in the Scopes monkey trial in 1922. William Jennings Bryan went on to run as a Democrat 3 times on an anti-evolution ticket. Fortunately lost all 3 times for president. The origin of new humans is a more concerning topic lately for conservative religious members, particularly around sex and sexual orientation, birth control and abortion, HPV vaccination, and gender identity. So these things that have to do with God's definition of who we are, that science is suggesting other things, is causing what James Dobson called a civil war of values. And that's really driven a lot of the political organizing among religious conservatives since the late 1980s, really, over 35 years now. And we're seeing a lot of the result. The target for that has been largely the Republican Party, because this is the party of conservative values, of being a little bit cautious, being a little bit traditional. So that is why they chose to focus their organizing efforts there. The result is what we saw in Ohio in this news report.
Weighing in on how public schools can teach things like evolution. The House today passed the Student Religious Liberties Act. Long story short, students cannot be penalized if their work is scientifically wrong, just as long as the reasoning is because of their religious beliefs. Instead, students are graded on substance and relevance. Every Republican in the House supported the bill. It now moves to the Republican-controlled Senate.
Now you can look at that and it's mind-boggling, and you can say that that's stupid and that we're not going to be able to compete internationally if our students are educated where the wrong answer is okay as long as it's religiously correct. In fact, that's kind of more like a theocracy than it is a science-based democracy or an evidence-based democracy. But you have to really think about it again. Those Republican legislators aren't doing that because they're true believers. I mean, I'm sure some of them are, but a lot of them are doing it because they're responding to constituents. And who's driving that conversation amongst constituents? Conservative political organizers that are evangelical in their motives. There isn't a lot of back pressure, a lot of back organizing by those who really care about evidence-based policy making. And that's probably part of the problem. Now, whoops, I think I've lost one of my slides here.
Weighing in on how...
Okay. Oh, I guess this is just the cover slide. Okay. All right, so moving on to the next battlefield, the postmodernism battlefield, or the identity politics war on science. And this one developed largely after World War II. Postmodernist movement really came up as kind of a critique of science and technology. After the bomb was dropped and after the Nazis used some cutting-edge science, Hitler was a great adopter of technology, the first politician to campaign by airplane, and the Nazis used the technology of phonographs and radio to inculcate the German people with their uniform ideology. In fact, they gave away something called the Volksempfänger, which was a cheap radio, gave it away or sold it super cheap, and then filled it with propaganda. In fact, thinking through the history of humanity and our communications revolutions, anytime we've had a major communications revolution, for instance, the printing press, we've had a populist uprising, like the Reformation, with an authoritarian backlash. The same thing has happened with the radio and mass communication with Nazis, and with television and the counterculture, which was thankfully much more peaceful, but now it's happening in a big way on steroids with the internet, and particularly social media over the internet. But is the idea of postmodernism correct? It was argued to try to discredit science and discredit the claims of power that advanced European societies could make by saying that there's no such thing as objectivity, that's just a power claim, that's a way to keep people under your thumb. And in fact, those who claim objectivity should be questioned because that claim is really just their attempt to hold power over you. But I think we have to really question that, especially in the physical sciences. It may be true in the social sciences, and postmodernism has certainly done its part to elevate previously discounted and disempowered voices that have greatly enriched our viewpoints. But science itself, at its best, does the same thing because it allows for, or it should allow for, all voices to participate in the best ideas through peer review, through experimentation, bubble to the top. It doesn't often work that way, but it does often enough that we've been able to advance over the last few hundred years. So the scientific method is designed to distinguish what we do objectively know and separate it from what John Locke called but faith or opinion, from our gender identity, from our racial identity, from all these other sources of subjective views that postmodernism has argued are equally or more important. But these are biases. They're not truth or knowledge. They're the things that science and the scientific method is designed to pull knowledge out of. It doesn't matter what your identity is. If you and I dip that ruler into that dish of water after rainfall, I bet you we'll come up with a similar result. That's objective knowledge. But we've seen in education and in journalism schools in particular, this idea take hold and without a lot of complexity, where the idea that there's no such thing as objectivity just becomes repeated as a mantra. There it is in this just example, the Voice of San Diego reporter guidelines. There's no such thing as objectivity. The problem is if you believe that, you're not going to really dig to get at the truth, right? Here it is with Linda Ellerby out on the speaking circuit. There's no such thing as objectivity. If you're not digging to get at the truth, then what do you do as a reporter? Here it is, even Nick Gillespie, the editor-in-chief of Reason.com, an objectivist publication, saying there's no such thing as objectivity. The problem that we run into in science policy and in our reporting in a world where more and more and more and more of these major issues that we're stuck on are driven by actual physical science is that there is such a thing as objectivity. But our journalists, the rudder that we use for self-governance in a democracy, don't think that there is. So they are often presenting two sides to the story. Bob says 2 + 2 is 4, Julie says it's 6, the controversy rages, right? Sell a lot of newspapers that way. Scientists, on the other hand, will say that most times one side is objectively wrong. I can show you with a simple demonstration that Bob is right. And then we have a politician. But this is the position these politicians are in, right? When the newspapers create, or the TV creates a controversy, they have to respond to that. So we wind up skewing our public dialogue and our policy making towards extremes because we are elevating ideas that really don't have any evidentiary foundation. And that opens the door right back to the same authoritarianism that postmodernists tried to reject. This is the problem with taking this argument too far, and this is the problem with what's going on in our media ecosystem right now, of course, being exacerbated by what's going on with social media, where everybody's getting siloed and fed more and more of whatever it is that they seem to be interested in. So the results are going back to COVID, what we saw, where we saw a widespread identity-based rejection of science. Because if there's no real trust in the evidence, and if there aren't speakers or media outlets that are reliably agreeing on saying, yes, we all agree that this is what the evidence suggests, that there is objective truth, we resort to tribalism. And the tribalism we resorted to really led to a wide disparity. This was from 2021. This was a poll in 2021, but it certainly predicted this last election when it was men that really had the widest divisions and that broke in many ways for Trump. But the results can be tragic. So this chart shows COVID deaths, and if you remember, the deaths were rising until the vaccines became available in early 2020, right? And then they began to fall. The Republican deaths were about 1.5 times the deaths of Democrats at that time because the issue was already politicized. Republicans were less likely to wear a mask. They thought they were, thinking that wearing a mask was somehow weak or effeminate, and were rejecting stay-at-home protective orders, arguing that this was an intrusion of civil liberty. They're blaming China or blaming Fauci. So this political charge that happened around this issue because of our media environment led to 1.5 times the number of deaths. But what's really sad is after the vaccine became widely available, what happened? Republicans were dying at 4 times the rate that Democrats were because they were rejecting that vaccine. They were rejecting the science in favor of the identity politics. In fact, they were rejecting it to the point, I had a friend of a friend who was rejecting it even as he died. And it was incredible. There's no movie-like, at the end, comeuppance when it comes to the real world, where people come to Jesus and they see the error of their ways. No, we hang on to the error of our ways, even to death. In fact, we double down into death with it. That's a powerful thing to think about. Finally, the industrial war on science, not finally, but next, the industrial war on science. Edward Bernays was part of the Creel Committee, created by Woodrow Wilson to convince Americans to enter World War I. And the Creel Committee, or Creel Commission, it's called both things, was essentially a propaganda outfit to surround Americans with all kinds of avenues of information that all gave them slanted news and information that were convincing them to go into World War I because America was really a separatist, protectionist, non-internationalist country at the time. After the Creel Committee, Bernays took those ideas to his uncle, Sigmund Freud, and developed them further, and then created a professional practice out of it that he called propaganda. He invented the term propaganda, and he went to work for businesses to convince the public to buy their products. And one of his first businesses was the American Tobacco Company, where he hired a famous suffragist who then in turn recruited, he hid behind her, she didn't identify him, and she recruited these debutantes, as she called them in this picture, to walk down Fifth Avenue smoking cigarettes, proudly smoking cigarettes. The idea was to break the taboo against women smoking, which at the time was viewed as sexually suggestive, shall we say. These women proudly smoked, and Bernays had newspaper photographers lined up taking their pictures, and it was in newspapers across the country, and they called their cigarettes torches of freedom. It was so effective that women across the country did begin smoking in public, and the sales of American Tobacco Company skyrocketed. Since then, freedom has been used more often as the #1 propaganda technique or appeal than any other word or idea. And this idea of hiding behind someone else so that people don't really know who's manipulating you is a common third-party technique, as he called it. Now, of course, since then, the field of propaganda, since the Nazis used Bernays' ideas and his book called Propaganda, it's been thoroughly greenwashed, I guess, as it's been retitled public relations. You guys, I debated whether I should just cut this slide, but I decided to leave it because you guys probably know about p-hacking, but it's a really common method. This is an example out of climate science, but it's a really common method used to confuse smart, well-informed members of the public. They're still lay people. They're not climate scientists. You've heard people on the road talking to professional societies saying, we don't know why, but there really hasn't been any warming for the last 10 years. In fact, there's been a slight decrease. And that seems to kind of be a soothing message, right? And it is based on actual numbers right there. He can show from NOAA's Global Land and Ocean Temperature Anomalies Index that there actually has been no warming for 10 years over that period. But when you put that in context, you can see, well, all right, yeah, but if you pick your endpoints, I can pretty much make the argument, say anything you want, when in fact, if you look at the big context of all the data, you can clearly see that the temperature is going up. And this method is done often. So when you're hearing messages that seem to be too good to be true or seem counterfactual to what you've heard from actual scientists, look for the p-hacking that's going on, because I can guarantee it's almost always there. Now this leads to a field now called product defense. There was a ton of spending going on in the climate world again, in this argument over climate change that was getting hotter and hotter and hotter coming into the turn of the century. And in fact, between 2000 and 2010, the Koch brothers and ExxonMobil and a few smaller players spent about $2 billion creating a giant infrastructure of disinformation, sometimes creating these front groups, organizations using the third-party technique, other times funding them and creating subsections that worked on the climate issue with their money. But what happened was they became incredibly influential. In fact, I want you to listen to Tim Phillips, president of Americans for Prosperity, who at the time had 4 times the number of employees as the National Republican Party.
I'm Tim Phillips, president of Americans for Prosperity. We're here in Billings, Montana.
We certainly did TV ads, radio ads, social media, We did rallies, events. We launched something we called Hot Air.
And we're sending a message to Senator Baucus and Senator Tester to vote no on this job-killing, tax-increasing cap and trade.
We got a hot air balloon, put a banner on the side of it that said cap and trade means higher taxes, lost jobs, less freedom. And we went all over the country doing events and stirring up grassroots anger and frustration, concern.
Cap and trade will slow the economy and cost American jobs.
That anger and opprobrium that you see in those images there really form the foundation of what we're seeing in our politics right now. It transformed our politics in some important ways. And the reason that it transformed it is that they were successful in killing that climate bill in 2010. But then what? All right? We've got this giant infrastructure that's been set up now. Now what do we do with it? These people looked around and they saw all these other industries. Largely they were commodities industries where the products may have some negative health or environmental effects, but they were lucrative. And they started marketing themselves to these industries saying, we can hold off regulation, we can reduce jury awards by using this network that we've created through social media, through the internet, through our messaging techniques. And a type of firm called product defense firms was born. Product defense firms specialize in this mixture of PR, law, and science, creating arguments that confuse regulators or legislators or the public and achieve that goal of holding back regulation or reducing jury awards. So those are some examples. Some of the industries that they are or have run product defense campaigns in are listed here, and the list goes on. Generally, like I said, they're commodities types of industries. They run them through hundreds of different front groups that are all funded by these firms generally, or sometimes through dark money firms. Generally, the old saying is true, follow the money, and in this case, the money from that original climate campaign and the infrastructure, and then the job preservation that the people thought, how can we keep doing this, has really developed into something that has wound up skewing our politics. And the people that are targeted over and over by this are Republican influencers, those people that surround Republican lawmakers. They don't have to convince the whole public. They just have to convince the folks that are in the eyesights of Republican lawmakers, enough to make the lawmakers think, geez, there's enough pressure here that I have to be careful, or I have to vote this way. The reason that they focus on Republicans is because the Republican Party and conservatism in general, it's part of science, in fact. The scientist has to be progressive. They have to be open to the new knowledge, new ideas, because otherwise you're not going to discover anything new. But you also have to be conservative. You can't stick your neck too far out there. You have to make sure that there's a solid foundation, that this comports with all the knowledge that has come prior, or if it contradicts it, that there's a reason that you can explain. But lawmakers have this, especially conservative lawmakers, have this same objective. They can't stick their necks out too far either, or they get chopped off, they get unelected. And particularly in the Republican side, the impetus is to say, let's just hold on a little bit. So that's why they were targeted as the easiest pickings, because if you can get enough of them to say no, you can hold back the regulation. So the product defense playbook really, like I said, the idea is to maximize revenue from a harmful but lucrative product. And it's famously played out with lead, with pesticides, with tobacco, and particularly fossil fuels, but it's also been beginning to appear in all these other industries. Particularly around 2011, I was at the AAAS meeting, and I was talking to Jane Lubchenco, and she was talking about how it seemed like there was this kind of just bubbling up of anti-science and like it was spreading virally somehow. And nobody really knew why this was happening. It was coming out of the climate and pulling to all these other areas, and it was because of these product defense firms really beginning to work, as we later learned. The tactics are, again, to surround these lawmakers with this information, to create this conceptual web. So argue there are uncertainties, so therefore we should do nothing. Vilify and intimidate scientists who disagree. Hire scientists to cast doubt on the established scientists or science. Captured journals will then publish these alternative facts, if you will, and the uncertainties. Paid influencers then quote the journals and gin up controversy. Law firms often bombard scientists that are targeted with FOIA requests if they work for a public research university, trying to cripple them, seeking all their data, and then if they do get the data, then trying to poke holes in it as best they can. Professional societies, like the Center of the American Experiment in Minnesota, with likely Republican donors, then host fake experts on the speaking circuit. Slanted talk radio, print, TV, news, and billboards kind of harmonize on the campaign message. And then you have social media trolls that punish people if they're online talking about this in a way that the product defense firm doesn't want, that's contrary to the campaign, or to reward other people in online conversation. Think tanks then provide newsletters and fake expert testimony, and actual, like ALEC, provide model legislation. AstroTurf organizations like Tim Phillips' Americans for Prosperity mount these visibility campaigns in lawmakers' districts. You saw him talking about being in the lawmakers' Tester and Bacchus's districts to try to put pressure on them. And then you'll see lawmakers afraid of being knocked out. They wind up parroting this and helping to reinforce the disinformation, and the thing begins to get a message of its own. So you can start to see why our friends who are, and some of us in this room, I'm sure, who are Republican or conservative-leaning, wind up bombarded with more and more disinformation. And once you get on one of these lists, you get served up more and more and more and more of it. Because if you're a donor, or if you're in a type of profession that is likely to be a donor, you're a business executive, you're an attorney, you're an engineer, you're a political activist, you get served this stuff much more than other people. And it begins to erode your sense of what is real. And you begin to rely more and more on your identity grouping to make your decisions. So you can see how the divisions have bubbled up in our politics and have really begun to drive us apart as a society. Now, taking advantage of this is the international war on science, something that's particularly waged by authoritarian countries who seek to weaken democracies. Here's a quote from Marguerite Simonian, who's Putin's chief propagandist. There she is essentially saying there's no such thing as objectivity, using that same argument. And yes, all journalism is opinion, but it's not true that there's no such thing as objectivity. In fact, when you think about it, what science is journalism, right? I mean, you guys have journals, and all it is one giant story where we're telling the story of what we tried out, what experiments we ran, what they showed, and what we think it means. It's just that as scientists, we think that there is such a thing as objectivity. So we see a lot of this stuff coming from Russian, Chinese, North Korean, and Iranian active political operatives, particularly online, particularly using social media, because that's so cheap and so easy, such an easy way to slip in to be deceptive, using the third-party technique, using propaganda to fool people, to spread public health misinformation, to promote climate change denial, to promote anti-vax info, to promote anti-GMO views, spread election disinformation and grievance. These are all visual examples of things from various countries. And the shared strategy that they have, even they're all competing with each other, is to amplify grievances and divisions, to promote sympathetic viewpoints. These are all PSYOPs strategies. To spread political chaos and to weaken democracies so that they can gain an economic and political advantage. And we have to be aware of this. This isn't just something that we talk about. It's something that we really have to use some critical thinking when we're online and have questions about the information that we're exposed to. So this is the challenge. This is the world that we're facing right now. This is what has led to the divisions, I would argue, that we're facing. So what are some of the solutions? Well, one of the first hopeful moments for me was when my friend Mike Mann, who is one of the early supporters of science debate, he's a climate scientist. He's the guy that developed the hockey stick graph that you probably saw Al Gore touting in his talks, showing how remarkable the recent warming is compared to historical temperatures. He won a lawsuit, defamation lawsuit, against somebody who said that he had tortured and manipulated data. It was a funny offhanded comment, but he actually sued them for defamation. He had just had enough because he'd been the target, probably the chief target of a lot of this disinformation. And he won $1 million lawsuit, and that began to set a precedent that other courts can then look to when we're talking about how to defend against disinformation, particularly as a scientist, but also as a public in general. Then there's also a lot of research now as we become more divided into what drives political opinion, what drives political beliefs, what is it about our psychology that allows us to be so easily manipulated by disinformation, and what might we be able to do to correct that? And there are a lot of hopeful insights. I'll share a few of them with you in a moment. One thing that one reason I was excited to be here talking to you guys today is to kind of make a little bit of an appeal. So there's a lot of evidence that shows that actually the most productive scientists also tend to be the most publicly engaged scientists. And it's counterintuitive because for a long time there was this attitude in the sciences, particularly among National Academy members, that denied Carl Sagan, for instance, an Academy membership because they thought he was more of a grandstander than a scientist. But in fact, he was more productive than most National Academy members in his science. And that's true a lot of times, that scientists that engage with the public develop the communication skills in simplifying their language and simplifying the concepts they use. But that ability actually forces them to think through the problems that they're working on in a clearer manner, and it often tends to make them more productive as scientists. So I want to appeal to all of you to become better scientists by engaging with the public. In fact, think about becoming a science advisor. In 1995, Congress eliminated or defunded its science advisory body, the Office of Technology Assessment. There the members all are in that photo, working hard on their laptops. Now they rely on lobbyists and the internet for most of their science advice. But you could help. Most of them don't have anybody that is a science advisor. None of them would probably pay you, but I bet you if you chose a party and started attending a local party unit events and ran into a member of Congress and volunteered to be a science advisor for them, I bet you some of them will take you up on it. This is also true for state legislators, for city council members, for mayors. In this world where so many challenges, and here's your pitch, where so many challenges have a huge science and technology component, don't you really want to know what's objectively true? I can help you work through that process. Think about doing that, not just through ESA. I think you should get involved if you're not in ESA as well. but think about going beyond, because to the extent that you can, if everybody in this room did that, think about the power that we could have right here, beginning to change the thinking of lawmakers. Particularly, I would suggest Republican lawmakers, so they have a little bit of back pressure. You're not going to convince them if there's millions of dollars working against you, but you are going to maybe sow a little bit of doubt, provide a little bit of counter focus, and maybe get them to think about the other people out there that think about these things that are also constituents. Run for office yourself. Run for school board. Run for your state legislature or your city council or your town board of supervisors or your county board of supervisors. Those civic involvements, often at that level, aren't even full-time positions. School board members often, get paid a couple $1,000, $6,000, if that. But they can help set the direction that our kids learn in for the foreseeable future. Another angle that we are beginning to work on is developing regulation around disinformation. There's a bipartisan movement, as you probably heard in Congress, around disinformation and social media algorithms, particularly in the national security angle, but I think that we can also work on expanding that in our civic involvement angle. And finally, communication. And this is where I want to give you a few tips, especially with Thanksgiving coming up. You've got your crazy Uncle Charlie sitting across the table, denying science, whatever it is to you. I wanted to give you some evidence-based tools that you can use in communicating not only with him, but with the general public. So the evidence shows right now, anyway, that evolution seems to shape our political perceptions. And it does this through, this is, by the way, some of the work of Kurt Gray and some similar psychologists and neuroscientists. It seems to run off of our vulnerability to predation. We weren't predators ourselves really so much as we were prey when we were evolving. And that level of fear is still in us. Today's perceived threats, however, are more social. They're to our lives and to our families. Both sides in this Democrat-Republican divide right now see the other side as predator, and both feel like prey. I can tell you that my friends who are Republican, and I have family members who voted for Trump, they are good people. I love them. They're reasonable people. They're just on the other side of a messaging war. So the dominant force in politics right now is a feeling of vulnerability, grievance over that vulnerability, and a desire to protect ourselves and our loved ones from harm. So think about that last point especially, the desire to protect ourselves and loved ones from harm. That's what really drives political divide, and that's what has to drive our political communication. We need to change our communication about science from telling people what we know to explaining how we know it. So don't just give them the conclusion if you're in a radio interview, for instance. Take the steps of showing how this knowledge was developed and trust that your audience, your listeners, will be smart enough then to come to that conclusion on their own. They can learn the what from hearing the how. And if they do that, then they own that knowledge themselves. They're much more bought in than if you just tell them something. Then add a personal story, a why, that relates why this is important to you as a person. That generally, think of a way that you can tie it in to shared concern about avoiding harm, to get that emotional charge in there. That builds empathy and it builds a reason to care. Okay. The next step is inviting humility. So there's a technique called exposing the illusion of explanatory depth. It turns out that we often just retain the what. and not the how. We race, especially rapid learners, super smart people who are confident. They race to the conclusion. They know the what. They nail it down so they can spit it out on a test, and then they're done with it. But that illusion that we get from that makes us think that we know things that we don't necessarily really know. If we can't explain it, how it works in detail, we don't really know it. So there's a trick that you can use to induce intellectual humility by asking people to explain how they know what they know. Here's an example of super smart, fast learners at Harvard University that were asked a question about what causes the seasons.
I think the seasons happen because as the Earth travels around the sun, it gets nearer to the sun, which produces warmer weather, and gets farther away, which produces colder weather, and hence the seasons.
How hot it is or how cold it is at any given time of the year has to do with the closeness of the Earth to the sun during the seasonal periods.
The Earth goes around the sun, and it gets hotter when we get closer to the sun, and it gets colder when we get farther away from the sun.
These graduates, like many of us, think of the Earth's orbit as a highly exaggerated ellipse. Even though the Earth's orbit is very nearly circular, with distance producing virtually no effect on the seasons, we carry with us the strong, incorrect belief that changing distance is responsible for the seasons.
I took physics, planetary motion, and relativity, and electromagnetism and waves.
I've never really had a scientific background whatsoever, and I got through school without having it. I've gotten very far without having it.
I had quite a bit of science in high school, yeah, through physics, first year, and 2 years of chemistry.
Regardless of their science education, 21 of the 23 randomly selected students, faculty, and alumni of Harvard University revealed misconceptions when asked to explain either the seasons or the phases of the moon.
When it's further away from the sun, then it gets colder.
The Earth's position interferes with the reflection of the sun against the moon.
So when I first started talking about these issues, when the first book on this topic that I wrote came out, I went to a couple of engineering firms in DC. And these guys just tried to rip me a new you-know-what. And I was stunned by how many engineers were absolutely convinced that there was no such thing as climate change. And it wasn't until I learned about the illusion of explanatory depth that I began to understand that this kind of thing has nothing to do with our intelligence. In fact, intelligent people who are good at making connections between different concepts are often the most vulnerable to misinformation. And in fact, probably a lot of us in this room, if we weren't doing what we were doing, would be equally vulnerable. So we can't be smug about people who think differently from us. We have to think about how to communicate to bridge across that divide. Arguing with them only causes them to double down, as we saw, for instance, during COVID. Asking them why they believe it causes them to engage their values, and that brings up passion and emotions, and that also causes them to double down. But if we ask them to explain how they hold the conclusions that they have, all of a sudden, it introduces them to their own lack of knowledge in the area if they can't explain what they think that they know. And then they become open a little bit to moderating their attitudes. And there's research, again, that has established that this works. And in fact, this is some social science research that's actually stood up in peer review. So think about that. Again, think about the phone, and it's about know-how. It's not the what. It's not, oh, this phone works just like Harry Potter's broom works. We don't have to know how. The how matters more than anything. So go back to the how. Finally, active listening. We're like an angry, divorcing couple right now, screaming at each other through a divide, or across a divide that we don't seem able to cross? Well, there's a technique that's been developed in couples therapy that actually works in science communication around these issues called active listening. And it tends to diffuse science denial. And the first thing is the intention that you bring to it matters. It's not that I want to prove I'm right and you're wrong. I don't want to come into a conversation and prove that you're deluded or that you're anti-science. That's not going to get me anywhere. I come in saying, I want to understand where you're coming from. And if I do that, that begins to diffuse the situation. And then we wind up being able to go through a conversation that goes something like this. Begins with listening, holding eye contact, mirroring their posture, whatever it is, and really focusing on what they're saying. Not focusing partway and in the meantime thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to argue with that one and that one's wrong and they don't know what they're talking about there. But actually really listening, because in the next step, you're going to faithfully repeat back what they said. So the idea is to truly understand, take in and truly understand what they tell you without making them feel defensive and without having defenses up yourself. And then once you've repeated it back, ask, have I got that right? If you don't, if they say no, not really, ask them to repeat it again and then repeat it back. Make sure that you've confirmed that you've got it right. Then validate their feelings about it. Given what you say about whatever the topic is, it makes sense that you would feel Y, X and Y. It makes sense that you would feel that way. This is important because, again, it acknowledges the reasonableness of them as a person and of their conclusion. It doesn't mean that you agree with their conclusion, but it means that you're acknowledging that it's a reasonable conclusion to hold given what they've said. That goes so far to bridging some of these divides. Then at that point, once you've truly and faithfully listened to them and acknowledged and validated what they said, then you could say, can I share my experiences with you? And at that point, most times people feel obligated to say, yeah, okay, because you've listened to them, and so there's a social pact that we all have. This is, again, psychology. And most times people will say, yeah, okay, yeah. And at that point, then you can, again, get into how we know. Not arguing what they've said, but talking about how you know what you know, and adding that personal story in, again, about avoiding harm, our shared desire to avoid harm. And finally confirming, does that make sense? Using this active listening technique, and you can look it up online, there's similar techniques out there. I don't think they're exactly the same as I've laid out here, but the gist is the same. You can go a long way in building bridges of communication that open doors, that let people back away from the fight a little bit, and hopefully plant some seeds about science and about objective truth and about reality and about our concern, shared concern going forward. Okay, so what to expect for science. This is my second to last slide here. I just kind of wanted to give you my semi-educated opinion about what may happen. All of this could be wrong, so take that as a caveat. I don't know anything, really. But the Trump administration coming up has indicated that there will probably, and there's a high chance that there will be budget cuts to NOAA, EPA. Particularly, there's hostility to NOAA and EPA over the climate issue and environment issue. But NIH as well, NSF as well. Probably not ARPA-H, possibly DARPA. There's history behind many of these, and there are public statements by Trump or in Project 2025. In public health, RFK Jr., for all you succession fans out there, he will, I expect, if he's appointed health czar or to lead the FDA or something like that, will be discouraging fluoridation and vaccination. But on the upside, I think that there'll be a push to improve food quality, the food part of FDA. I think that the idea of getting some of the preservatives out of what passes for food but is not food may be helpful. In environment, I think we may see a replay of some of the issues that we saw last term with David Bernhardt and Andrew Wheeler. Bernhardt he was a coal lobbyist that ran the Department of Interior. Andrew Wheeler wound up running EPA. He was an oil lobbyist. And both of them have shown pretty high hostility towards environmental issues and the politics of the environment, which is viewed as a left-wing liberal thing, and are more focused on getting things done, particularly for industry, much more of a pro-mining, pro-drilling attitude. Climate is going to be really interesting. The tension here between the big oil money that Trump got and the big money from Elon Musk, who he really admires, is interesting. Elon was an early supporter of science debate, and he's not a climate change denier. So I don't know for sure what's going to happen and how that's going to work out, but I think that there are arguments that are going to be made to leave the IRA subsidies in place, and we may see Trump backing away from his pledge to roll back that stuff, because a lot of these EV plants and battery plants are in heavily Republican districts. They've created 343,000 jobs, and the carbon credits that EV manufacturers get, Tesla needs those, but Ford and GM need them a whole lot more than Tesla at this point. So this has become so entrenched that it may be difficult for those subsidies to be rolled back. Nuclear, I think, is also probably going to be much more of a focus, nuclear energy, and possibly more, I don't know about ethanol, but ethanol, particularly in aviation, as aviation fuel, I think that there may be a stronger push because it's also considered good for farmers. In space, Trump's always been a big fan of space. He's excited about it. One of the reasons why he's excited about Elon Musk, besides the fact that Elon Musk ran his ground campaign for him, but I expect to see a lot more focus on getting a Mars mission stood up and running, possibly a purchase of Starlink, which is a SpaceX subsidiary, internet provider that I use myself. A lot of people who live in places that don't have access to broadband use Starlink, and there are arguments for possibly purchasing it. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I wouldn't be surprised. One thing that I am concerned about is an increased militarization of space, satellite wars, and occupational territory claims. Excuse me for that noise there. Gender issues, rollbacks of gender-affirming care via the education department and major health agencies. I think that that's almost certain, given the antipathy on the right, particularly by Trump, but also by Elon Musk, who has a trans child. Abortion, I wouldn't be surprised to see an effort to pass a national ban past the past viability at 26 weeks. I think that they would argue that, well, we shouldn't be going past that anyway. So that would not surprise me, even though Trump has said that he's not interested in that. And finally, on social media and disinformation, I think the jury is still out. Despite the strong bipartisan efforts that have been to rein in social media and get them to hold some greater responsibility for the editorial control that they do exercise through their algorithms, Elon is himself, as you probably know, a huge proponent of totally unfettered social media, and doesn't understand the need to regulate because he doesn't really understand social interactions in the same way that his predecessors at Twitter did. So all of this stuff puts us at a precarious moment, but a moment that's not without hope. I'm hopeful that we have an opportunity to, as things get shaken up, to also make some great inroads and make some positive changes. But the danger is very real. And the danger comes from this propaganda and its power to affect our society. In 1920, right-wing relativity deniers traveled around. They were engineers, again, by the way, interestingly enough, traveled around Germany following Einstein, and anywhere that he spoke, they would criticize him and criticize the theory of relativity as a big hoax and Jewish science. And he wrote to a friend at the time, and he said, "This world is a strange madhouse. Currently, every coachman and every waiter is debating whether relativity theory is correct. Belief in this matter depends on political party affiliation." And if that doesn't sound familiar, I don't know what does. So, thank you for listening. Thank you for taking the time. And I hope if you take anything out of this, think about getting engaged in ways that will work to improve our society for the better, whether it's running for office or it's engaging with policymakers, and start by practicing over the Thanksgiving table coming up. Thank you.